Well, it's an honor and pleasure to introduce our final session and speaker for tonight, Dr. Irfan Alamgir. He will give more details about his own background, but he's going to be discussing wars and diseases, healing a broken world in apocalyptic times. So he's our resident medical professional, and he will be also, as you saw in Golda Wise, he wrote a section on the medicine of the Mahdis, which I will now hand over to him.
Thank you very much, Professor Asfa. So, I just want to say hello to everyone. My background is as a general practitioner, and I'm also one of the trustees of the Ahmadi religion of peace and light here in the UK. My topic is the apocalyptic topic. So what I intend to do is go through a series of narrations with a particular focus on Christianity and Islam, and then correlate it to the events that are folding before our eyes today. And before I delve into my presentation, I'd like to elaborate a little bit more about my background, because I believe that it's intimately linked with my journey into the Ahmadi religion of peace and light. And basically, I come from a family of scientists. All of my 3 siblings and both my parents are also medical doctors. And basically, we all specialize in different fields. And everything from general practice, gynecology, gastroenterology, cardiology, it's a very left hemisphere upbringing that I had. And the main reason for that was actually my father, who is an interventional cardiologist. Just a quick shout out to my dad. This is a picture of him receiving an MBE from the Queen for his services to cardiology. And he obviously left a deep impact on me as a scientist, always emphasizing the need to critically appraise information and evidence, because, as we know, evidence-based medicine saves lives. And here's a picture of me. I had to put this in only for the reason to explain that although I came from a Sunni background, a Sunni Muslim background, I was always kind of attracted to religion in general. So I never restricted myself to just Islam. So that's a picture of me on the right on the annual Hajj pilgrimage, which was from 2015. And that's me graduating from Imperial College School of Medicine in 2009. So for me, I never was one of those people who saw, being from a scientific background and religion as being two mutually exclusive things. I was always reading religion as I read a medical textbook. So for me, if you have figures like Prophet Muhammad and Jesus Christ, whose combined followers total over 4 billion, arguably the 2 most influential men in history, then if they're saying things, people are wowed by the prophecies of Nostradamus, but if the 2 most influential men in human history are saying things and then they manifest before your eyes, I think to apply critical appraisal to their sayings is very important, just like it is when you are reading a medical paper. So, for me personally, the most interesting area of Islam was Islamic eschatology, which I studied avidly and mainly while I was actually at medical school. So I not only studied Islamic eschatology, I was drawn to all of the major world religions and their end times kind of narrative. So, and what I found really was a striking similarity between them all. In terms of whether it's Christ or Kalki, whether it's the Maitreya or the Mahdi, they all have a similar kind of story in terms of an apocalyptic picture, which is where things get really bad in terms of famine, poverty, inequality, things that we're seeing in the world today on a record scale, natural disasters. And then to usher humanity out of this, we have a savior figure. And this for me was really the most important thing of religion, because what I saw when I surveyed the world is I saw mountains of food being stockpiled in Europe while millions of people are dying around the world of starvation. I saw middle-income families, the average man being taxed at 50%, 40 to 50% of their income, whilst the rich billionaires of the world had an unlimited number of loopholes and tax havens to access. So I could see a lot of the prophecies that I had read growing up unfolding before my eyes. And even in healthcare, by the way. There are big pharmaceutical companies that have been in the news and they've had certain exposure, which has shown that, they've not always been ethical in the way that they've done business. So the question arises, are we living in the end times? Are we living, and again, that distinction must be drawn. When we say end times, we don't mean an apocalyptic destruction of the planet like the dinosaurs who were wiped out. What we mean is a time where human beings reach, because of their decision-making in not supporting a man appointed by God, which is really the central pillar of our faith. We believe that until, as Jesus said, on earth as it is in heaven, until that time, the earth will not know peace and prosperity. So this is a fundamental tenet of our faith. So anyway, let's go into some of the signs of the end times in terms of the Islamic and Christian narrations. The first one I want to start with, actually, is the death of King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia. Now, when I first came across this narration, I was gobsmacked, I was dumbfounded, because there are certain details within this narration that really beg the question, where was this knowledge coming from? I mean, a prophecy that was made over 1,000 years ago, books of which are present in the Islamic seminaries around the world. And the narration I'm referring to is this one. So you'll see why there is a picture of a leopard there as I continue. So the narration goes, the Messenger of Allah, Prophet Muhammad, said that Hijaz, which is what we call modern-day Saudi Arabia now, Hijaz will be ruled by a man whose name is the name of an animal. If you see him from afar, you would think he is cross-eyed. And if you come close to him, you do not see anything wrong in his eyes. He will be succeeded by a brother of his named Abdullah. Woe to our followers from him. He repeated this 3 times. And then he said, give me the glad tidings of his death, and I will give you the glad tidings of the appearance of the Hujjah, which is Imam Mahdi. So let's break this narration down, step by step, because there are so many facets in this that are absolutely fascinating to me. Now, the first thing is the name of an animal. Now, if we look at this slide here, these are the kings that have ruled the Hijaz, Saudi Arabia. And the first of them was Abdul Aziz bin Saud. And then after him, there were a string of successors, all of whom ruled Saudi Arabia to the modern age, which is Salman, King Salman, and of course the Crown Prince MBS or Mohammed bin Salman. If you look at the names of all of these men, there is only one that has a name, which is the name of an animal, and that is King Fahd. Fahd in Arabic translates to leopard. So that's the first thing. The next thing that is pointed out by the Prophet Muhammad is that he has a strange condition. Well, he calls it cross-eyed, which in medical terms we would now call strabismus, which is where the eyes are misaligned. There is ocular misalignment of the eyes. And he said this is a sign to recognize the man whose name is the name of an animal. Now, he mentions a peculiar detail, which is that if you look at him from afar, he is cross-eyed. But if you come close, it seems his vision is normal. And certain types of less extreme forms of this condition actually manifest in this way. So let's go back to the narration. It's said that this man, who has the name of an animal, who is cross-eyed in this particular way, and King Fahd, by the way, was diagnosed with strabismus, and he had a mild form of the condition. He will be succeeded by a brother of his named Abdullah. A series of fantastic coincidences. Absolutely fascinating. And of course, in 2005, when King Fahd of Saudi Arabia died, he was succeeded by King Abdullah. And the last detail of this amazing narration is that the Prophet said, if you give me the glad tidings of his death, implying that he is not particularly a good character, I will give you the news of the rise of the Mahdi. And in 2015, which is the time I've been an active member of the faith, and again, because of narrations like these, is that 12 men came forward and said Imam Mahdi has appeared with a message. So the narration very closely matches the news of the coming of Imam Mahdi, and he did indeed appear to 12 men who proclaimed his arrival. Now, the next hadith I want to bring up, which is also a very interesting narration, again putting a time on the appearance of the Imam as a sign, just as Jesus said, look for signs of my coming in the New Testament. And this is a fascinating hadith as well. It says, narrated by Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, who is the 5th Shia Imam and the successor of the Prophet Muhammad, he said, if the Sea of Najaf dries up and 100 years have passed after that, then wait for a man. It was said, and who is he, O son of the Messenger of Allah? He said, Mim Ha Mim Dal. And he was specifically referring to the 12th Imam, who has been attributed with these 4 letters of Arabic, which correspond to the English MHMD. Now, the Sea of Najaf started to desiccate towards the end of the 19th century, and it was completely dry by 1915. Now, look at the specific detail. It says 100 years after that. 100 years after that comes again to that time of 2015. This is a picture of the Sea of Najaf. Now, the Sea of Najaf is not really a sea. It's more of a lake, a body of water, just as much as the Sea of Galilee. And it is to the west of Najaf, modern-day Najaf. And this is a picture taken in 2002, like I said. So you can see that the sea is completely empty. Now I'm going to transition to more of the narrations that talk about the signs of the end times. Things that were spoken of by Jesus Christ and the Prophet Muhammad, and how they're unfolding before our eyes today. The first of the narrations is again from one of the Imams of the Ahl al-Bayt, the successors of Prophet Muhammad. This is the 8th Shia Imam, Imam al-Rida. He said, before this matter, i.e. the rise of the Qa'im, is Bayu. Now, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that properly. I'm not a native Arab speaker, but it says, I did not know what this word meant, the person who's narrating this narration. So I went to perform pilgrimage and heard a Bedouin say, the day is Bayu. So I said to him, what does Bayu mean? He said, extremely hot. So one of the narrations is saying, before the advent of the return of the messianic figure known as the Qa'im, and again, we can take time to now delineate exactly what I mean by this, because we say Imam Mahdi, we've used the words Ahmad al-Hassan, and now I'm using the word Qa'im, which in Arabic means the riser. So this refers to 3 different people. Imam Mahdi is the 12th Imam. Imam Ahmad al-Hassan is the first of the 12 Mahdis that succeed the 12th Imam. And the Qa'im, or the riser from the family of Muhammad, is a reference to the second Mahdi. All of these characters are mentioned in the will of the Prophet Muhammad, which is again a central pillar of our belief system. But getting back to this narration, which says this extreme heat will prevail before the rising of the Qa'im. Here is a graphic I would like to show and play, which is from NASA. And what it's showing is the temperature of the Earth being recorded from 1980 all the way to our present times. And as I play it, you will see that towards the end of the 20th century, things really do heat up. So it's beginning to get warmer now. Obviously, red is indicating the heat, and the bright red is indicating a rise in temperature of 2 degrees centigrade, which doesn't sound like much, but on a global scale, on an ecological scale, it is absolutely catastrophic. And you can see the area of the concentration is in the North Pole, which is, of course, where the ice caps are melting. There have been narrations from all of the major world religions, whose followers number 6 billion people approximately, that say that the arrival of the messianic figure is associated with natural disasters. And if you look at this graphic from the Institute of Economics and Peace, we can see that from 1960, there were 39 kind of incidents that were reported. In 2019, this number jumped up to 396, a 10-fold increase. And again, you can see here that the sharpest incline happens around that year 2000 period. Other things that have been affected, that are climate change things that are affecting our globe. Now, here is a narration by Imam Ali, the successor of the Prophet Muhammad and the first Shia Imam. He said, "Between the hands of the Qa'im are locusts in their season, and locusts in other than their season, red like blood." And we have seen, and this is just one headline of a number, and you can easily research this online, there have been huge swathes of locust infestations around the world, particularly in new areas where they weren't seen before. And the reason is quite simple. With the earth heating up, it is creating these dry, arid environments. And then on top of that, what happens is you get torrential rain. And this combination is what gives rise to this explosion in locust populations. And there are many, many examples of this in the news. And they're calling these the apocalyptic locusts, of course. People who are familiar with the Old Testament will know in the book of Exodus, it is one of the 10 plagues. A narration by the Prophet Muhammad, he says, lightning and thunder will increase when the hour approaches. So much so that a man would ask, who was struck this morning? So they would answer him saying, so and so. And this is mentioned in both Sunni and Shia traditions. Now, again, if you go to the World Meteorological Organization, you can access a whole bunch of facts. But I think that this particular one I put in for the reason of that if you see a 1 degree increase in the temperature of the planet, it corresponds to a 10% increase in the most incendiary forms of lightning, which of course is related to the forest fires that we've witnessed in countries like Australia and the USA recently. Another narration to do with climate change, at least that's what the scientists are attributing it to. The Prophet Muhammad said, the hour will not begin until many earthquakes occur. Jesus also says in the New Testament in the book of Matthew, earthquakes will appear in diverse places. Now, this is a graph from the National Geophysics Data Center, which shows that major earthquakes from 1900 to 2022 have gone up 5-fold. You can see again that upstroke happening around 1960 and kind of continuing to increase in a kind of a linear relationship. Now, this is another fascinating narration. For me, anyway, I found this to be very interesting. Jesus says in the book of Matthew, if those days had not been cut short, referring to the days before the second reappearance of Christ, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. There are narrations in numerous religious traditions that say towards the end times, as these catastrophic scenarios unfold, there will be a perception that time is moving fast. And you may say, well, this is a subjective thing. But, me being 40 years old, it seems that as technology has evolved and smartphones and et cetera, time does tend to go fast. Prophet Muhammad said, again, look at the parallels. He said, the hour will not come, the hour referring to the judgment time, the time of tribulation, until time passes so quickly that a year will be like a month like a week like a day, and a day like an hour. But is this only a subjective thing? Not really. Because in 2020, scientists made a startling discovery. They found that instead of slowing down, the Earth has started to spin faster. Prior to this, the spin of the Earth, the counterclockwise rotation that obviously gives us the 24-hour cycle of the Earth, instead of slowing down, it's actually begun to speed up. It is now spinning faster than at any time in the last 50 years. The shortest 28 days on record all occurred in 2020. Forbes also reports this. They say, and this is now 2 years on, so the spin of the Earth is actually increasing, not decreasing. They say Earth is suddenly spinning faster while our planet just recorded its shortest day since records began. Now, it is in milliseconds. It is not a drastic change, but the fact that it's happening is very interesting to the scientific community, and they have no idea. They have hypotheses about what could be causing it, but there's no real explanation for the increasing spinning of the Earth. The next area I want to talk about, war, which is, of course, across the board mentioned in all the religious narrations as one of those apocalyptic prophecies. This is perhaps the most famous verse in religious literature. It's attributed to Jesus Christ. He says, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom." Imam Jafar as-Sadiq, the sixth Shia Imam, he said, before the advent of the Qa'im, the riser, two types of death will occur, the red death and the white death. The red death is from war, and the white from plague. They will kill 5 out of every 7 people. So just at the end there, it gives like this ratio of 5 out of every 7 people. And it's interesting that the world has over 7 billion people, just over 7 billion people by current estimates. Now, let's look at the geopolitical landscape of the world today. And in this last 110 years, we've had 2 world wars, which we've never had in human history. We have now weapons that can destroy the earth many times over. We have conflicts in Ukraine, in the Middle East, in China, and essentially 2 camps are developing. We've recently had Sweden and Finland joining NATO, which Vladimir Putin called a direct attack on Russia. We have this scenario where war could break out at any moment. And many experts have said that we are on the brink of World War III. More narrations, this time to do with the weapons used in the World War and technological advancement. Albert Einstein's famous for saying, "I don't know with what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones." Of course, referring to the nuclear arsenal of the world. Prophet Muhammad said, "And iron will glide in the air and fire will rain down upon them, and the people of the earth will die 5 from every 7. Imam Ali, the first Shia Imam, said, "The iron will fly in the air and iron will walk on iron." So referring to what we would call in the modern day trains. Now, another interesting narration from Imam Ali peace be upon him, is that he said, and indeed the atom will burn the world. A very specific narration. The atom, the atomic bomb, is what the Imam was referring to, which was developed in the middle of the 20th century. Again, these weapons that can cause extinction level events on Earth have only come into the hands of human beings in the last less than 100 years. In the Middle East, there have been wars. Now, this is a picture of Imam Ahmad al-Hassan, the first of the 12 Mahdis and the bringer of the seventh covenant, as you've heard from the presentations before, I'm sure. In 1999, he publicly declared his call. And since then, in the area, in the Middle East, there have been a number of wars that have broken out, which he prophesied. There was the invasion of Afghanistan in 2001, after the Twin Towers collapsed, and the Americans and their coalition forces moved in. The Iraq War broke out in 2003. And I've highlighted this because Imam Ahmad al-Hassan, as with the prophets who preceded him, made predictions. The Imam in the year 2000 said that Saddam Hussein's reign will very soon come to an end. And the reason for it is because Saddam Hussein decided to write the Quran, a holy book for the Muslims, in his blood. And the Imam said, for this act, he will be removed. Now, Saddam had had an iron grip on Iraq for well over 2 decades. And that prophecy, of course, came to pass during the Iraq War in 2003. The Iraqi civil war broke out in 2006, which is, of course, where ISIS and the Sunni Shia factions were involved in a civil war that caused a tremendous amount of bloodshed. We had the Lebanese war in 2006 against Israel. There was the Hamas takeover of Gaza, which directly resulted shortly after into the war against the Gaza war, again, an Israeli and Palestinian conflict. In 2010, there was the Arab Spring. So in 1999, the dawah spreads to the Middle East, and shortly thereafter, there are wars and rumors of wars and revolution in the Middle East. An increase in infectious diseases. This is also mentioned throughout all of the major world religions as a sign that herald the coming of the Messiah. Here is a narration from Imam Ali. He said, before the advent of the Qa'im, there will be the red death and the white death, and the white death is the plague. Now, this is from the British government website of new infectious diseases that track from 2003 to the present time. And here you can see it. There are lots of, I don't know if you can see it, but it's an explosion of pandemic diseases has happened from H1N1 to the pandemic of our age, which is, of course, coronavirus. And you can see around 2003 to 2005, there's a kind of sparse population of these new viral infections and pathogens that have come into play. But around 2008, there's an explosion of new viruses, novel viruses, the likes of which we've never seen, and also viruses that have, and pathogens that have moved from one part of the world to another. So, for example, the West Nile virus showing up in Germany, and the chikungunya virus, which is a mosquito-borne virus showing up in Italy. Diseases that we thought we had vaccinated out of existence are making a comeback. In Europe, measles has gone up a whopping 3,000% in terms of cases. Whooping cough is at an all-time high in the UK. We have the spread of cholera, which has also had huge surges in tropical areas. RSV, that causes pneumonia in children, has made a huge spike. Strep A, influenza, and the bubonic plague causing 1 death in the United States just as recently as February. Now, this is the same or microorganism that caused the death of 30 million people in the 14th century in what we know as the Black Death. So climate change, the heating up of the Earth having a fever is having catastrophic consequences. And the increase in infectious disease is definitely on the up. I just want you to watch this video as it very nicely explains why infectious disease is on such a rise.
Our climate is in crisis. Our health is at stake. Cholera, Zika, malaria, these are diseases of our worst nightmares. Today's warming weather is creating perfect conditions for these infectious diseases to spread farther and faster than ever before. And it's all part of a bigger picture. Here's what the climate connection looks like. Climate change makes oceans, lakes, and other bodies of water warmer, which in turn allows pathogens like bacteria and toxic algae to thrive. The water we use to drink or bathe in or even play in can easily become a source of disease in these conditions. Millions of people around the world could be affected. While heat helps pathogens grow, extreme weather events like hurricanes and floods can spread them even further. And disease can spread through animals, like mosquitoes, that transmit viruses and bacteria directly through bites. When it comes to public health, mosquitoes are public enemy number one, killing more people each year than all human violence and all other organisms combined. Hotter temperatures mean that mosquitoes, ticks, and other carriers can survive and thrive in more places across Earth, living longer and reproducing faster. The result? Diseases like Lyme, dengue, and yellow fever can all increase their reach and spread more quickly than ever. These diseases affect us all, but like so many climate impacts, they hit people in developing nations hardest. We know what's driving this crisis. Burning fossil fuels fill the atmosphere with carbon pollution, warming our planet and changing our climate.
Climate change is causing a huge slew of problems on planet Earth, and the heating up of the Earth is directly responsible for this, and this was prophesied by the prophets and messengers of God in the Abrahamic religions as well as the non-Abrahamics. Now, coming to the pandemic of our time, coronavirus. Coronavirus has not stopped. It is still mutating, it is still evolving, it is still infecting people. Just a few months after its discovery in Wuhan, China, at the end of 2019, it underwent a mutation to become the Delta version of the virus. This spread in the Indian subcontinent like wildfire. A few months after that, it mutated into Omicron, which was 6 times more transmissible than the original strain of COVID. A couple of months after that, it mutated to the BA2 version of the virus, which was 9 times more transmissible. And as such, it continues. Now, Imam Ahmad al-Hassan, the first of the 12 Mahdis, prophesied in 2015 that the world will come to a standstill because of a tiny creature. Now, there have been other pandemics. There's been MERS, there's been SARS, but they never actually got to the scale where we had to lock down and close shop, where you could see at airports all of the planes grounded. Everything came to a standstill. And it's been called by the news media the doomsday virus because of its explosive ability to mutate and change and infect human beings. Again, in the UK, we are very familiar with these signs, stay home. And the other thing I mentioned before, which is the grounding of planes and the shutdown of the world that happened after the COVID virus had become officially a pandemic. Prophets they prophesy. And Imam Ahmad al-Hassan, being the vicegerent of God as we believe, made another very fascinating and very striking prophecy. He said, "Those whom they said are cured, a group of them shall die," referring to the COVID virus. And another group will exhibit other symptoms. The disease will have affected their brains and nervous systems. Now, this statement was made towards the end of March 2020, at a time where coronavirus was merely a respiratory infection, causing pneumonia, causing people to go into septic shock as a result of pneumonia. But Ahmad Hassan pointed out this very specific thing about it. And then a few months later, patients started to emerge with central nervous system symptoms. They started developing epilepsy, strokes, confusion, personality changes. And it became the talk of the town that COVID not only affects the lungs, but it actually attacks the central nervous system. Long COVID, which is now written about, it's mainly talking about the effects on the brain. Long COVID causes confusion, feeling spaced out. Lots of patients come in with this, and we really don't have any cure for this problem. And it is debilitating the economy around the world. Now, this is something that I also found very interesting, which is the immunological studies that have come out just in the last 1.5 years. Not only does COVID evolve rapidly, but it warps the immune response. It triggers the immune system to go haywire. And what actually kills most patients is not the virus itself, but the immune system attacking the body injudiciously, releasing what they call a cytokine storm that causes people to die. But it's also, the COVID-19 virus, or SARS-CoV, is also an expert in evading the immune system. Another thing that they found recently in published and in many, many journals, which is that it has this immunosenescence, which is that it weakens T cells, the very cells that are responsible for memory in the immune system. So when you encounter a virus or a bacteria or any pathogen, your immune system takes a picture of it. So it remembers it. And the next time it encounters the same microorganism, the immune response is much more efficient. But COVID induces what we call an immune amnesia. And so it explains why there has been an upsurge in viruses that we thought we had previously vaccinated out of existence, like measles, like whooping cough. So clearly, the treatments for COVID, and we've had the vaccinations, and they've developed more boosters and more boosters in response to the new strains, but none of them are really proving to be effective. The Imam said that people would get reinfected with COVID, and shortly after recovering from their symptoms, many did get reinfected. People who've had multiple jabs are getting reinfected with COVID. I put down these two books by a doctor named James Lafanu, and he's not only a general practitioner, but he's also an expert in the history of medicine and science. And he writes, I think, more clearly and lucidly than anyone else about the limitations of modern medicine. He talks about how we've reached a ceiling in terms of certain conditions. Things like metastatic cancer, which, despite our scientific advancements, we have not been able to improve our outcomes from when treatment began 30 years ago. And this is for the main cancers, the big killers, prostate cancer, breast cancer, lung cancer, and so on. And what he recommends in his books is we need to adopt more of a preventative outlook in terms of treating disease, exercise, dieting, meditation, and so on. But is there another way to treat these viruses that are mutating and speeding up in their mutations and infecting and killing people on a record scale? Well, if you look at the Bible and the Quran, and you look at the other spiritual traditions like Buddhism, there were men of God who were experts in healing as well. And now in this day and age, Imam Ahmad al-Hassan is no different. He issued a challenge when COVID was first discovered to the religious clergy in Iraq and Iran. And the reason was very specific, because these are the people claiming to be God's appointed vicegerents on the earth through the doctrine of wilayat al-faqih, or the rulership of the jurisprudent. And he challenged them. He said, if you ask me publicly for a cure to COVID-19, I will give it to you within 10 minutes. And of course, the challenge, they never really took it on. Now, one of the most famous, probably the most famous healer in history is another messenger from God. For us, Jesus Christ is in a continuation of messengers going back all the way from Adam to the Prophet Muhammad and now to the Mahdis that we've mentioned. Jesus Christ had an ability to heal people. In the Quran, it says Jesus healed the leprous, Jesus healed the blind. And in this verse of Matthew, it says, he healed the demon-possessed, the epileptics, paralytics, he healed them all. God is all-powerful. God has the cure to all illnesses. This is our firm belief. And there are many traditions around the world that also have at their origin a spiritual tradition, not just the Abrahamic religions. So in Hinduism, the Ayurvedic medical tradition traces back to the rishis, the sages of the country. And I think as a general practitioner who sees patients with chronic diseases like diabetes, like hypertension, like epilepsy, for which our treatment methods are very limited, if there is another way, do we not have an obligation to at least explore them? And with that, I wanted to end my presentation with a quote from the Prophet Muhammad, which he says, for every disease is a cure, and God has the cure to all diseases. Thank you very much.
Sarah,
Okay.
would you like to go next?
Okay. Thank you very much. That was really fascinating. I hope you don't mind if I ask questions rather than really respond to what you presented there.
Yeah.
So, in my own research and through my work at Inform, so I'm here representing Inform, which is an educational charity founded by Eileen Barker, which provides information about minority religious movements.
Mm-hmm.
So we're particularly interested in how people live out their religious beliefs in their day-to-day life. So in practices as much as in beliefs and theology. And we've heard a lot today about the theology of the movement, but perhaps not as much as I would like yet about how people in the community actually live out these beliefs. So I'm particularly interested in the health and healing practices that you might practice within the community, whether there's anything in addition to allopathic medicine that you practice. You mentioned their kind of preventative approaches and so on. If you could talk a little bit more about any of that you practice. I read your section in The Goal of the Wise on medicine that you'd written, and you talked there about the Qaim having cures for some of the diseases. So if you could say a little bit more about that, perhaps. And you also talked there about medical knowledge progressing. And so I was wondering whether in your vision of the kind of end times and the creation of the divine just state, is it scientific medical knowledge that will progress simultaneously with divine healing? Is there some kind of balance there? Or is it that medical knowledge will not be needed because it will just be divine healing? They're my main interests.
There have been books written which kind of are a collection of narrations from the Prophet Muhammad, which talk about healing using, I guess, the Hippocratic method, where it says, let medicine be thy food, where certain things are identified as having therapeutic properties. One of the things, for example, the Prophet Muhammad mentions in hadith over and over again is, for example, the use of honey. And for me, and I'll go through a few of the examples, but honey in particular, because we have in hospitals infections which we call superbugs, which have evolved as a direct consequence of overusage of antibiotics. And the ones that I'm really referring to are called MRSA or MRSA. And in New Zealand and Australia, just in the past few years, they found that patients with chronic ulcers are actually responding better to the use of Manuka honey than they are with these very powerful, multiple side effect causing antibiotics, which to me was absolutely fascinating. Other things that that have been mentioned in the prophetic narrations are things like saffron. And if you look at the latest research on saffron, which has been published in medical journals now, one of the effects of saffron is that it is a mood elevator. And they found that giving 30 milligrams of saffron a day to chronically depressed patients with moderate to severe depression even, had the same effect as SSRIs, like Prozac, without the slew of side effects. And actually, one of the main side effects that kind of stops patient compliance with SSRIs is that it actually, it does, there are studies that show it elevates mood, but it also causes loss in libido, and it affects relationships in that way. Saffron not only elevates mood, but it increases the libido. And so therefore, you know, why at medical school they're not telling us these things? These are the things that really kind of, it begs the question really. If you have something that is produced in nature that has the same effects without the side effect profile, why not put that first? Why are we given in a 6-year medical degree, which I had to go through in London, a 4-week course on basic nutrition, you know? And there are other things that have been mentioned. We had a program, a show which was talked about earlier called The Medicine of the Mahdis, where the Imam gave cures to things like psoriasis, which is a major burden of disease. Psoriasis is a chronic inflammatory condition of the skin. It also causes a form of arthritis. So it's not just limited to the skin. It causes depression because of the appearance of the lesions. And the treatment in the medical world is potent corticosteroids applied over a long period of time, which not only suppresses the immune system and makes you more vulnerable to infection, but it also causes the thinning of the skin and growth of microorganisms and infections. Now, the Imam mentioned a very interesting cure for this. He said, the peel of a banana contains ingredients which will cure psoriasis. Now, we conducted another case study within our community when you're talking about kind of the practical application of the faith. So the Imam told us to do this. So we made a bunch of different ointments. We basically ground banana peel and mixed it with coconut oil. We did one with olive oil. We did one with, I forget which was the third one, with Vaseline as well. So we did 3 different things like this. And then we also got banana peels. And we had 3 or 4 people in the community who had psoriasis. And what we did was we gave them these different treatments to try. We applied banana peels right directly over the skin. And initially, the person who we used it on said that there was local irritation for about the first few hours, and then the irritation kind of dissipated. And then after that, we checked it on a daily basis. After 1 week, this huge plaque on his leg, which we made an episode about, disappeared with the banana peel. And now if you look in the literature, and if you look on even YouTube, there are people who are saying that they're using, and this was not talked about before. We did the episode, I think it was 2017, if I'm not mistaken. And now there are a whole host of people talking about banana skin. Banana skin, by the way, has been used for a long time in beauty treatments as an exfoliant. You know, I guess you have to put it to the test yourself to find out. But there are lots of people doing it online, and they're sharing the results because they're fed up of taking steroids that have all these problems associated with them. I also talk about preventative medicine. I did an episode recently on vitamin D. So, for example, the flu vaccine, which we give to the people who are susceptible to infections, people over the age of 65, people with diabetes, these are given at certain times during the year to prevent them getting flu. Well, we've done studies that show that if you give somebody vitamin D in a highly absorbable form at a level where their blood levels reach therapeutic range, vitamin D works better than the vaccination for the flu. So this is something I encourage all of you to read up. And the good thing about the modern age is that you can look up these things. Don't take my word for it. We did other episodes on medicine of the Mahdis as well. So I don't know how deep you want me to go into that, but I think I've given a few examples there. The second question that you had was, you said the Qaim has cures to diseases. Is that what you were wondering?
I can see that there were kind of three topics in this presentation. One was about health, and then two others were one on climate change and on the war. So I think with what relates to health topic, when I was listening to you, I was thinking of and somehow memories came to me about other groups which are also referring to science when they are talking about health. And particularly, I was doing my PhD thesis on Art of Living Foundation, which is a group which is a branch of Transcendental Meditation, and they have developed a very wide network of researchers who are constantly monitoring different benefits of breathing techniques and so on. So this is something like a comment. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to climate change, I was thinking that you were mentioning climate change. You were showing us evidences. I was wondering, what is the stance of the community to the climate change? We know that some religious communities ignore climate change. I understand that you do not ignore, but is there any practice within community? What do you do to tackle climate change? Do you have any decisions within community? How do you deal with climate change? And then regarding war, again, I would have here some comments because I'm coming from the region which is at war now. I'm coming from Baltic states, and Ukraine is very close to us. Mm. And we don't say that this is a conflict. We say that this is a war.
Yes.
This is Russian aggression war on Ukraine, which never attacked Russia. And we don't listen in that region what Putin is saying about Sweden and Finland, that they wanted to join, because he does not take into consideration democratic decisions of the people in those countries. But regarding the war, I wanted to ask you, is there any element of pacifist beliefs in your doctrine? Would you encourage your members to join the military forces to defend Europe now? Because I think Europe is in war. Would you do you have the beliefs that would allow you to join military forces?
Okay. So the first question, you brought up transcendental meditation. Big fan of transcendental meditation. I think it has a huge body of literature behind it now. And I probably should have mentioned it earlier, but transcendental meditation has been shown to be as effective as many of the antihypertensive drugs that we give in terms of reducing blood pressure, both systolic and diastolic, both aspects of blood pressure. It has so many benefits that, again, I am just completely flummoxed by the fact that if there is all this research on it, why is this not taught to patients in mainstream medical practice? Why are we giving diazepam and other anxiolytic drugs that cause addiction, dependence, withdrawal symptoms when they're taken off them, horrible types of symptoms? People get hospitalized sometimes with the withdrawal symptoms of these particular medications. But yet we don't ever prescribe meditation. I mean, now there's slowly, because of the burden of disease on the healthcare system, the NHS in the UK, there are now there is now more interest, but it's mainly patient-driven interest. Patients coming to you and asking you about, doc, should I take an aspirin or should I meditate for my blood pressure? And to be honest, I think it's a doctor's responsibility to make people aware of, for example, taking aspirin on a regular basis and what it can do to the body, versus meditation, which doesn't have any harmful side effects.
I don't know if you know, but Finnish doctors have started prescription of walking in the forest.
Well, there you go. Revolution's beginning already. Yes. More of the same. Yes, indeed. So is that adequate in terms of an answer? You also said climate change, and you said, what are we doing about it? Of course, respecting the ecosystem, the environment is critically important. The Prophet Muhammad mentioned narrations, and in his spiritual legacy, which is the Ahmadi religion of peace and light, we adopt the same attitude. The Prophet said even during war, don't cut down trees. Something that is, we know it's what keeps the soil together and has many other benefits in terms of topsoil erosion and so on and so forth. And in general, of course, we're definitely not going to unnecessarily pollute the earth. And in fact, we believe that when God's appointed vicegerent is ruling the earth, part of that utopia is that the environment will be cleaned up. There will not be these nuclear spillages and all the fossil fuels that are being burnt. There will be advancement in technology, let's just say, that will come from the knowledge of God and his messengers that will revolutionize life on earth. And one of those will be the cleaning up of the environment. This has been talked about.
Mm. What about war?
Military, right? Okay. Well, we believe that all wars that are not under the stewardship of a divinely appointed man are unjust wars. And that's not saying that, so we denounce wars in all of its forms because, again, it is only under the leadership of a divinely appointed man, a Moses, a Jesus, a Muhammad, that any type of a just war can actually take place.
Okay, Rosita, you are last but not least.
Thank you very much. It was really very interesting bit, but you covered so many different topics that it's difficult really to react on all of them. Because it's like if we continue talking about the wars, it's for instance, the Russian narrative is they're also defending their countries because it's like where this justice, who defines the justice is, and how we define the justice, because it seems that the red line is when you defend your country, that is the justice. But sometimes the politicians they're capable of explaining that somehow invading another country is also defending your country. So it's
yes, that's why.
And I believe that is because we talked through the day, in fact, because it's continuously for me. It was the same question. It's like how we define the justice or the king is how we define what is like how in our material world, with our material minds. Mm-hmm. How we find this line, because the conflicts all the time, they happen because different people, they give the different excuses or explanations. And that's where because this morning it was that at some point we started to speak the different language in one of the continents. It's in the presentation. And now is the problem that we cannot understand each other. That we have the disagreements and then the bad things happen. That's one, perhaps it's, in fact, is it's a comment. The other thing is I thought a lot. It's for me, it's also, I cannot just live my days without reflecting in the world, because it's like so many people, they are talking about that something is really bad happening, that is really, we believe that something is really deep happening in our time, in between the countries, in the person, and etc. And sometimes they just reflect that, but if you take like, I don't know, 50, 60 years ago, people were saying always that it's like, it's a bad time, it's the end of time, something very bad is happening. Or if we talk, now people, they behave in such a bad times. But if you even take the thinkers from the Roman times, they were saying, temporis or mores. So it's like we continuously say that now is so bad, and before it was somehow better. And I lived the Soviet. My youth was Soviet. So, and some old people would say that, your Soviet time was so good. And I'm saying what was not good, right? But then I understand that maybe people reflect to their youth, because when we are young, we are optimistic, and all the problems are not important, and you go for. It's just like, my point is that maybe I don't know if it's truth, but it's just sending it out. Maybe sometimes it's like, if 10 people, 100 people, millions of people sit and keep repeating, the world is ending. Mm-hmm. Maybe we end the world. But if we stop it, we take the personal responsibility, we say, wait a minute, let's do a different way. Let's take another path. We say, we do the right thing. I start from me. I take the responsibility of what I do.
Right.
And maybe you will do, and you will do, and you will do, and you will do. And somehow other millions of people will do something good. I don't know. It's like is it reflecting this way of thinking, or we just go like a river and say, okay, apocalyptic?
Yes.
Because it was in the prophecies that you mentioned, and other people mentioned, that some people will be saved, that not everybody will perish. Yes. And perhaps that's where there is this grain of personal responsibility, what we do every day. Because we create a reality. Yes. Our thought is very powerful. And if, like all this audience, we will say, that's it. That's the end of the world. It will be the end of the world. But if we change, it's just provoking you to maybe...
I think it was Gandhi who said, be the change you want to see in the world. And it's about creating that inner revolution before the external revolution. And it's not like we are wearing that kind of thing, the end is nigh, and then ringing a bell. Yeah. We're saying that actually there will be a redemption of humankind from the precipice that they're rushing towards, when they finally realize that it is God, the creator of the world, and the person he chose and works through, the veil of God, the mask of God that he faces creation with, which Jesus Christ we believe was, which Moses we believe was before him. And in that succession and line of men appointed by God, when they are in their rightful place, justice will prevail on earth. And the apocalypse is merely the shifting of power from where it doesn't belong to where it does belong.
You've laid out the criteria essentially for entries. Mm-hmm. It's not good.
We're definitely in agreement.
How much worse, or is there a criteria for how much worse it's going to get and how that will develop? And who will your Mahdi somehow come out and make some changes? And alongside that, I think Rosita's point is very good. In that framework, as individual members, and it goes a bit back to my earlier point about self-determinism. What role does self-determinism and responsibility have in the religion, rather than, shall we say, being more passive and waiting for something to happen? Because I mean, personally, I would agree with Rosita that you know, it's vital that we take our own, we're causative about circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to sort of like work that in and understand how that fits with your perspective. You know.
So you said, how bad are things going to get? That was the first part, right?
Well, yeah, do you have a criteria? So.
Well, I mean, I think it's quite... it's a very disturbing narration which says, 5 out of 7 will perish. And truly apocalyptic numbers. And obviously it is from human choices and with the pollution, with the lack of responsibility in terms of creating these circumstances and conditions on Earth where the Earth's heating up and all the after effects of that. And also war. I mean, why look at the wars that have taken place in the past, which were completely, for the most part, really unnecessary and didn't accomplish anything good. And again, it's like, how sick does the patient need to get before he goes to the healer, who is the prophet and messenger appointed by God, who is Moses, Jesus, Adam, Abraham, all of these men that were appointed by God. They are the ones until, again, it just keeps coming back to this. And the goal of the wise, the book, ends with, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, I can't remember the exact words, but it says the goal of the wise is to identify the man in each age which veils the Spirit of God. God is not a human being. But how does God interact with human beings? Through another human being. I mean, and this is the philosopher king. This is the person who has the solution to our ills. And until we recognize that and accept it, like the Imam said, I have the cure to COVID. I, with my own eyes, witnessed somebody get well from some symptoms that could have led to a hospitalization. And through the drinking of this drink that the Imam gave, we were able to see immediate results. It's absolutely shocking. I wish humankind would get this and not have to undergo the suffering, but are human beings asking? Do they want God's vicegerent on ruling? This is the thing.
Mahdi.
Just very quickly, the question of self-determination and responsibility, absolutely, it is our responsibility, not just as members of the faith, but as human beings, that to have that utopia being an absolute reality for everyone. And I grew up, even before being in the faith, but even more so being in the religion, that is the purpose of religion. It's not about rituals and prayer and 5 times a day, but it's about ensuring that it is a world where humanity can live in welfare and everybody's human rights are respected. So we believe, yes, we absolutely have the responsibility for that. But to make that change, that's the whole idea of the philosopher king. It is a human being whose political skills is combined with absolute knowledge of the absolute truth. And with that combination, this is when you actually can make change. And we believe God created us in the religion. We believe that God created us in His image, and it is our goal to perfect ourselves and go on that journey so we can reflect God's perfection in us and really build that kingdom of God within ourselves first, so that we can make it a reality. Because our dilemma is the people who are holding the wheel and driving are completely void of any respect of life or human rights or anything, and that's how we ended up in the mess that we're in. So that's why I believe we have to, with the guidance of the Imam, we believe we absolutely have to, like I said, build this divine just state within us. And from there, it is absolutely our responsibility to make that a reality more.
So I just wanted to point one thing out about the Imam's COVID challenge, which basically parallels a Moses Pharaoh moment, where there was this public sort of declaration to the heads of religion. And that's something that I think needs to be further researched, empirical studies done, instead of a case of one. And this is where we invite the medical community, to come in, because this would be a tremendous proof of the knowledge, because COVID got everyone's attention. And there's been predictions that there's going to be other kinds of COVIDs coming.
Yes, exactly.
So the medical proof and the medical healing, and sort of right now, the way it was sort of brought out in 20, shortly after the pandemic hit the world, that's high stakes kinds of pronouncements, because if it's true, then he is who he is. And if he is who he is, then it's time for the world to pay attention and put that person in a position of power in order to actualize all the cures that he has. And I think I'm glad Dr. Irfan mentioned it, but I'm hoping that those of you who are listening will take that line of inquiry very seriously, because that's the type of thing that will, I testify to it. Lots of people testify to the cure. It'll shake people up and it will get their attention, like in a way that all the other pieces of knowledge might seem more like esoteric or abstract, but this one impacts their day-to-day life. And if the COVID cure is true, then its source is true, and that has implications. And I think that's something that we should take very seriously, and ask ourselves why those two that he challenged did not accept the challenge, because of course they knew that if there was if they accepted it, this is exactly a Moses Pharaoh type of scenario. So I think I just wanted to reiterate that point, because I think it has implications for all the other things that we're talking about, because we are here for solutions. We're not here to fan fear and try to get everybody, because apocalypse means transparency. It means the unveiling of hidden things and getting closer to the truth, so that we can develop towards the most optimum version of ourselves. And I think that's something I'm glad the doctor brought up, and he brought up his own testimony regarding that, and I think all the other cures as well, and that chapter that's in the Goal of the Wise. And there's one more thing I wanted to just, in terms of free will, there's a very intriguing statement in the Goal of the Wise when Imam Ahmad Hassan is asked about how much a human being has free will. And he gave a number. He said the human being has 11% free will, and the rest is determined by the order of the universe. So, all right, let's see what this 11% is. Because I always wondered how much is our free will, and I was really shocked to see a number given in terms of how much free will the human being individually and collectively has, and how much is determined by God, and how much is written in the stars, as the book says. So this interaction between free will, self-determination and agency, and the divine plan, it's a very powerful kind of interplay. And I think that number is another one. We can go and see what does this number mean.
Yeah, and I think it would be great to test whatever it is. The other examples you gave about, that come up in Ayurvedic medicine and natural medicine, these are the communities, or, the naturopathic community in the UK, as you're here, would be very interested if there was something like that. Allopathic, I'm not so sure,
Sure.
But anyway, we're perhaps going a bit off
No.
Personally, but I think that would be very interesting.
We want to know the recipe. I'm waiting for the recipe. We are not going out of the room.
We hope that that's where we wanted to end the day, with that type of inquiry. But I mean, obviously we have sessions tomorrow, and we're hoping this is the beginning of very deep empirical kinds of inquiries across disciplines. I mean, we don't have, it was natural for our first group of academics to be mostly in the new religion world and, the religious studies world and the human rights world. But I think also we would like to see perhaps medical doctors come and scale some of these things up and see whether these cures work. I mean, that's the proof is in the pudding, I guess. Right.
We all have been involved in, particularly those who have studied the repression of new religious movements, on how there is a trend in legislating against the possibility for religious movement to propose alternative therapies. Right now, in these very days, there is in France proposed amendments which will be imposed in the end, even the parliament doesn't want them, to the law against cults, which is already very bad. And most of the debate is on Article 4. And Article 4 to be introduced will make it a crime to discourage or criticize at a certain level the traditional medicine. So meaning some of the things you have said today can become a crime in France. But
in many countries.
But there is a big but. If you go, some of us also are quite frequent visitors to Eastern Asia, where there is a different trend. Because in fact, in Eastern Asia, for good reasons, sometimes for nationalistic reasons, like in mainland China, the governments are actually supporting and integrating non-Western medicines. And many religious movements, for instance, they will quote to you in Eastern Asia, sometimes even in the West, the fact that in 2015, the Nobel Prize for Medicine was given to a Chinese doctor, first female Chinese from mainland China to get the Nobel Prize, called Tu Zhu, for her having given evidence that if rather than use Malaron when you go to a malaric area, which is kind of aggressive medicine, you use a herb called Artemisia, which the Chinese sells as a pill called Artemisine, you get the same result and less or no side effect. So the book by Tu Zhu became a world bestseller, and basically is also promoted by the authorities in communist China for their own purposes. But basically, the Tu Zhu book is called The Gift of Chinese Traditional Medicine to the World. It will argue that herbal medicine can solve a number of problems without resorting to the chemicals. And we see this promoted in many Eastern Asian countries, such as Taiwan or Singapore. So it seems there is a totally different attitude. In the West, there is this pressure mostly from the pharmaceutical
Exactly,
companies
yes.
to put you in jail if you criticize them, saying, oh, you are a cult. But in the East, on the contrary, and as I say, the world is complicated, sometimes for nationalistic reasons. It's the same in India. They are promoting Ayurvedic medicine, and the government is promoting Ayurvedic medicine. In the East, on the contrary, these alternatives are subsidized and promoted, and sometimes even the Nobel Prize is awarded to somebody who proposes alternatives to the Western medicine, like in this case of Tu Zhu from China.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Dr.